Good evening, I'm Jason Vio. Katarina is away tonight. Here's what's making news right now.
We're throwing everything in the kitchen sink at this, and we're going to continue doing that to make sure that we have the proper health care that people require.
The idea is to finally show another aspect of the city's history that has never been really focused on before.
First time, it was terrifying, but after that, with the help of my instructors, I really, I got to actually fly the plane, and I was like, well, this isn't so bad. And then I started to actually enjoy it.
Thanks for joining us. Hospital departments across the province have been forced to shut their doors due to a lack of staff. Healthcare workers say patients are not getting the care they need, and for the first time in weeks, the Premier is addressing this issue. The CBC's Ali Chiasson has that story.
Make no mistake about it, there's a logjam, but 90% of the patients are getting taken care of when they're going into the hospital. Can we do better? 100%. I'm a strong believer in continuous improvement, investment.
Also, to make no mistake, continuous does not mean new. Premier Doug Ford today spoke for the first time in weeks about the healthcare staffing issue, but didn't announce any new initiatives to fix it.
We've hired over 10,500 new healthcare workers. We've added 3,100 beds.
And yet, several hospitals have had to reduce their delivery of care, the latest of which, Toronto General Hospital, where the intensive care units are at capacity. The CEO of the University Health Network says frontline healthcare workers and patients deserve better.
We hear clinicians and those who support them over and over saying, I'm stressed, the system is at a breaking point, I'm at a breaking point. It's hard to see the kind of light at the end of the tunnel for this point. So I think we're looking for hope to build resiliency and, of course, the confidence both of patients and providers that we have some solutions for the future.
We know that the care is not even remotely what it should be.
A study conducted by the Registered Practical Nurses Association of Ontario found nearly 7 in 10 nurses say they are unable to provide adequate patient care because of a lack of time and resources, and nearly 1 in 2 said they're considering leaving the profession for good.
Bringing new nurses in is great. We have to do that. Bringing foreign or internationally educated nurses in is a really great thing that that we all encourage them to do. But bringing new nurses in will never be of assistance if we don't keep the ones we already have.
While the Nurses Association says the province isn't taking care of them in a lot of ways, physicians say the numbers the Premier quoted,
9 out of 10 high urgency patients are finishing their emergency visit within targeted times.
Suggests his finger isn't on the pulse.
In our emergency rooms in the GTA, we've been hearing from all of our colleagues, it is routine to be waiting between an hour and 2 hours for patients to actually get from registration to triage. So during that period of time, the clock is not on their visit, and yet that is a significant amount of time if somebody's truly unwell.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Meanwhile, the president of Windsor Regional Hospital says the situation here isn't one to worry about at the moment. David Mouche says there are more beds and more staff at the hospital than before COVID. When it comes to clinical staff, he says there's 10% more and also 10% more beds available. He says he can't foresee what may happen in the fall and winter, but if it does become an issue, Mouche says the hospital will alert the public. The woman at the center of one of the sexual assault allegations rocking Hockey Canada is speaking out. The incident dates back to 2018 and allegedly involves some players from the World Junior team. In a statement from her lawyer, she says she made it clear to police then she wanted criminal charges pursued, despite Hockey Canada claiming otherwise. The CBC's Ashley Burke has more.
This lawsuit, the start of Hockey Canada's public reckoning. It alleges the woman was intoxicated and that while she was engaged in sexual acts with one hockey player in 2018, he allowed 7 others to enter the room without her knowledge or consent and sexually assault her.
She said that in the last 2 months, she has felt very vulnerable and exposed, that this is not something that she ever wanted to kind of spiral into this national scandal.
The Globe and Mail spoke to the woman and first reported on this statement from her lawyer. It says she is fully engaged and cooperated with all legal and formal investigations surrounding these events. It comes after Hockey Canada released this statement in May, saying the person bringing the allegations forward chose not to speak with either police or with Hockey Canada's independent investigator, and also chose not to identify the players involved. It wasn't until a month later Hockey Canada corrected the comment about police.
The fact that Hockey Canada has stated repeatedly things that have turned out not to be true is one of the reasons why me and many others are calling for a change in leadership at Hockey Canada.
Hockey Canada's investigator from criminal defence firm Hennon Hutchinson told MPs that she closed her investigation in 2020 because the complainant wouldn't participate.
I needed her version of events to push forward in my investigation.
The case has since reopened, and the complainant provided a statement but will not sit down for an interview. One law expert says that's understandable.
I am completely unsurprised that the complainant does not want to sit down and be interviewed. She has clearly, contrary to what we were originally told, fully cooperated and provided a great deal of evidence and documentation on the record already.
The lawyer said the complainant gave Hockey Canada and the NHL an 8-page statement, along with 5 additional pages of photos and 4 pages of text messages, as well the results of a polygraph test she passed. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Windsor's LGBTQ history is on full display at the Chimchuk Museum. It's a timeline of major milestones titled Out of the Shadows, Onto the Streets. Some of what happened in Windsor were firsts in all of Canada, and it's a joint exhibition between Art Windsor Essex and Museum Windsor.
This is our history, and queer and trans kids should see themselves in schools, and unfortunately there isn't anything that was created before, so this is a starting point to help to change that. And also I think Windsor should be really proud of its history. Unfortunately, we have an incredible history, but we're kind of sidelined when it comes to a lot of things in the rest of the country. This is an example from 40 years ago. This year was the first reported person who died of AIDS in Canada was this gentleman from Windsor. And at the time, he died in 1982. And since then, we've known that people have died before him, but he was the first reported case in the whole country. These two individuals, there are two Windsor locals who were part of the group that fought for the right to get married. And the actual court case for the Supreme Court of Canada is named after their last name. This individual, he is a teacher in the public board, and he's actually the first educator in the country, in the province, to officially get his gender marker changed for the Ontario College of Teachers, and was the first out trans man in public education. This year is the 50th anniversary of the first gay liberation group in Windsor. They initially called themselves the Windsor Homophile Association, but quickly changed their name to the Windsor Gay Unity. They also fought the CBC, who refused to put in public announcements because the word gay was, and they also fought the CBC to change that policy as well. Unfortunately, the history of queer and trans community is a lot of times things were thrown out. Most of our buildings, our hangouts were destroyed by the city, and we're trying to reclaim a lot of our history, one piece at a time, and this hopefully will be a method to help change that.
You can find the exhibit on the first floor of Windsor's downtown art gallery. It will be on display until September 4th. Air cadets in Windsor haven't hit the sky in 2 years due to COVID-19, and today 13 of them went up in the air once again, getting them one step closer to gaining their private pilot's license. The CBC's TJ Deer was at Windsor International Airport to see them in action.
We start off with our external inspections first, so I like to check and make sure that this is still intact, because if we can't get in the plane, we can't fly.
Vaishnavi Reina has been an air cadet for 6 years. After being landlocked over the pandemic, she's ready to get back up in the sky.
It feels really good to be back here, to be flying. Before the pandemic, we would have like gliding days for our cadets, where we'd go out to an airport, and there'd be sometimes like former cadets or instructors that would take us up in the gliders, and it was really fun.
It's a rarity, an all-female class, roughly half identifying as diverse. a point of pride for their superiors. Reina, the squadron leader, says she's leading by example.
I've always made it, I've always wanted to make a statement in the cadet program that, just because I am a visible minority, I can still do so much. And I push that in my squadron that, no matter what skin color, gender, anything, whatever you are, just as long as you're there and you're trying your best, that's what matters.
The cadets' superiors were also excited about having them back in the air.
It's huge. I mean, we've had 2 years of no activities. The pandemic, obviously, everyone shares that mutual feeling, but we're basically restarting the program. The cadet is restarting the program.
Reina's test will take place in the cockpit of a Diamond DA-20. She's walking Mugisha through her pre-flight checklist to make sure everything is in order. After checking out the planes, I couldn't resist taking a seat in the cockpit myself.
So this is what every cadet steps into every time they go into the cockpit, and here's what they see.
With the checklist complete, it's time for takeoff. Most of the cadets are flying with an instructor from Journey Air, a flight school based at Windsor Airport.
So how do you think the flight went?
I think that went really well, actually. Despite the wind and everything, yeah, it was a good flight.
2 cadets flew solo for the first time. As per tradition, they received what's known as a solo soaker from the other cadets.
For Reina and the other cadets, this is one step closer to realizing their dreams. And soon, that dream is going to be a reality. TJ Deere, CBC News, Windsor.
It's been recognized as the worst airport in the world for flight delays. Toronto's Pearson Airport is now introducing new technology that they hope should reduce wait times for incoming travelers.
These machines can process anyone that is over the age of 16. A traveler will approach the gate, scan their travel document, and have their picture taken to confirm their identity.
Using electronic kiosks is not new to Pearson, but they say this is new technology and it's faster. However, it doesn't address the entire problem. Unifor's director of airlines says it's not something you can solve in a short period of time. She says there is still a major staffing shortage at Pearson. According to the flight tracking service Flight Aware, as of July 24th, Pearson Airport still ranked first out of the busiest 100 airports in the world when it comes to flight delays. 60 years ago on July 30th, the European freighter known as MV Montrose sank in the middle of the Detroit River after colliding with a barge carrying cement. Back in 1962, the Detroit River was not as deep as it is today, and the ship rolled over on its side and sat under the Ambassador Bridge for months. At the time, crews worked to right the ship and seal the gash in the Montrose's hull. Windsor's harbor master says it created quite the buzz that summer.
So the shipwreck is where those dirt piles are. That would have been the Detroit dock where it came off. So the Montrose in July of 1962 hit a barge on the American side of the river, which ripped a 40-foot hole in her bow. What happened was at 9 o'clock at night, just getting dark, the processes that were available at that time for security calls coming off the dock were believed to have not been followed by the Montrose, causing this accident and the collision to a barge that was full of cement. So it was very heavy. The barge and the tug did not sink. The Montrose had a large hole in her bow, and the captain of the Montrose forced himself into the shallow area of the Canadian side of the Detroit River. But he came to rest just east of the Ambassador Bridge on the Canadian side. But 40 to 50,000 people, they say, came down on the shoreline to see the Montrose as she lay on her side with a massive hole. She lay that way for quite some time. They did have to right her. Many articles talk about the closing of the Ambassador Bridge to pedestrians because so many people came on top of the bridge. The owners of the bridge at the time said it was unsafe. And people were leaning quite far over the rail to get that perfect picture because it was right under the pier on the Canadian side of the bridge. But also, if you look at some of the video that is out there, you'll see the number of recreational vessels that was around this wreck was absolutely phenomenal. And if we were to have such a thing now, that would never occur. And they determined that the ship was a total loss. It was a full marine casualty, and it wasn't even a full year old yet at the time that it was declared a loss. This was her maiden voyage into the Great Lakes, this one voyage that it made from coming from Europe.
Wow. In the end, Barry says the Montrose did sail again under a different name, but it ended up sinking a second time in Cleveland and eventually became a barge. Still to come here on CBC Windsor News at 6. A hot one today, but it won't be as warm over the next few days. We'll have your full weather forecast coming up next. It was a hot and steamy day here in Windsor. Earlier this afternoon, during the hottest temperature peak, we thought we'd make some cookies in a van. Mike Evans used the dashboard as the cooking surface, as you can see, taking some store-bought cookie dough and giving it a go. The temperature inside the van started at about 25 degrees, eventually getting up to 50. And 4 hours later, the cookies were, well, as done as they could be as the clouds started to set in. Well, there you have it. Dahlia joining us live for weather now. I mean, who needs an oven when you have heat like this?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I thought I was melting, but apparently so is the chocolate and the cookies are baking. So, I mean, that really tells you how hot it is out there because of that humidity that we're seeing. but things will begin to change because there's moisture in the air that's coming in tonight and a severe thunderstorm that is kicking in as well because of that humidity and the damp conditions that we're going to be seeing tonight. So the normal high for this time of year is 27 degrees. Today's high is 33 degrees, which clearly we could tell with it reaching almost up to 40 degrees today. Normal low is 16. Today's low is 18 degrees. So the current temperatures in Windsor right now, 31 degrees. Sarnia, 21. It's a little bit cooler in Sarnia and Goderich. And Chatham, Kent is 28 degrees. Now with that humid X that we're talking about, bringing temperatures almost up by 10 degrees, if not more. Windsor, 41 degrees, and that's how you saw those cookies baking, and you're probably baking today as well. Sarnia, 29 degrees, Chatham, Kent, 38. Now, there is a risk of an extreme thunderstorm tonight in some parts of the region, so Windsor, Leamington, Chatham, Kent, we're keeping a close eye on that thunderstorm warning that we are hearing about. London, same thing. Goderich, there's actually a tornado warning that we're keeping an eye on and a watch for that. Hail could be expected in that area as well. Now, there is precipitation that we are expecting tonight. As you can see, it's making its way. That's an extreme thunderstorm and precipitation. Now, that will start to clear up tonight at about 12 a.m. And then as we head into tomorrow, 7 a.m. as you commute to work, there's some scattered showers that you will begin to see on your way to work, but that will slowly clear up with some fog, scattered showers throughout the day. As we head into Friday afternoon, some scattered showers as well. That will begin to clear up Friday night at around 9 p.m. and 11 o'clock as well. Winds are gusting really high in Windsor right now, and along with those damp conditions, that's what's going to create that moisture, and winds will create that thunderstorm that we're keeping an eye on going into Thursday. Overnight tonight, temperatures will drop to 21 degrees. Things cool down just a bit, but there is that rain and thunder that we're keeping an eye on as well. As you see the 5-day forecast tomorrow, it will be humid again. Temperatures will feel like 36 degrees. You get a bit of a break on Saturday and back to those damp conditions Sunday and Monday. Jason?
And while you were doing your weather, I popped over to the windows, and those dark clouds are really starting to set in. No thunder, lightning, or rain just yet, but you can see that system you were talking about moving through.
That's right, and you'll see it more overnight, and that will carry into tomorrow as well.
All right, we'll have to keep an eye out. Thank
Keep
you so much.
Yep. Okay, take care.
Still to come, this year's Scrabble Players Championship went to a Montreal man, and a CBC reporter challenged him to a game. That story is coming up next. Pope Francis is once again asking forgiveness for the abuses that Indigenous peoples suffered in Canada's residential schools. During his general weekly audience, the Pope dedicated his talk to his trip to Canada.
It was unlike other journeys. In fact, the main motivation was to meet the Indigenous peoples, to express to them my closeness and my sorrow, closeness of the church, my sorrow, and to ask forgiveness for the harm done to them.
Pope Francis apologized at several stops on what he called his pilgrimage of penance in Canada last week. Today, he was again speaking about the role that members of the Catholic Church had in the harms done to Indigenous people. On the last day of his Canadian trip, the Pope met privately with some residential school survivors and heard their stories. He called it a very painful moment, saying, quote, "We need to give face to our errors and our sins." In the U.S. now, President Joe Biden just signed an executive order aimed at protecting access to abortion. The measure helps women who want to travel between states to get an abortion.
I commit to the American people that we're doing everything in our power to safeguard access to health care, including the right to choose that women had under Roe v. Wade, which was ripped away by this extreme court.
It's the second executive order Biden has signed meant to safeguard reproductive rights since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in June. The order comes a day after Kansas voters decided to support abortion rights, 60% in agreement for the choice to remain. The Supreme Court leaves individual states to decide on abortion. Now, more than a dozen states have already banned abortions or restricted them up to 6 weeks of pregnancy, a time when many don't know they're pregnant yet. A Montreal man has won this year's Scrabble Players Championship, and CBC's Matt Demores decided to have a word with Michael Fagan about his victory and challenge him to a game.
Michael is such a boss.
This wasn't just a good Scrabble turn for Michael Fagan. It's the moment he secured victory at the Scrabble Players Championship in Baltimore and the title of 2022 champion.
Very thrilling, but also very surprising for me. I mean, I'm certainly a very, very strong player, but this is the biggest competition of the year in North America.
Fagan's journey to Baltimore began when he started playing in smaller tournaments as a teenager, but his knack for spelling started much earlier.
And at the young age of 3, I was using fridge magnets to spell out all kinds of different words on the fridge.
Pretty impressive beginnings, but I wasn't going to let that intimidate me.
So Michael, are you up for a friendly match?
Yes.
With the linguistic gauntlet thrown, it was time to get serious.
Now, I challenged him to a friendly game, but make no mistake, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to compete.
And my colleagues were there to stand by me.
Let's go, Matt. Let's go. Let's go, Matt.
Hey, do any of you guys know how to play Scrabble?
Oh, God.
With my opponent ready, the match began, and it wasn't pretty.
I'm actually lucky here because I can play all 7 of my letters.
Your opening word that you used all your letters for gave you 70 points?
That's correct.
All right, well, we're off to a great start, so let's keep this going. Let me see if I can catch up a little bit.
Spoiler alert, I didn't. But Fagan's luck and skill were lining up just fine.
It's a relatively obscure word, ZEK. It means an inmate in Soviet labor camp.
Finally, I had to face facts. I wasn't going to beat the master, so I resigned in disgrace.
Don't be so hard on yourself. I mean, it's your first time playing this game in a really long time.
Well, that's very generous of you. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to play this game with me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome.
As I walked away from the battlefield of words in shame, Fagan had his sights on next year's championship, with a drive to defend his title. Matt Demores, CBC News, Montreal.
And in case you were wondering, Fagan's winning word in Baltimore was leverett. Well, Environment Canada in the last few moments has issued a severe thunderstorm warning. A watch, rather. So keep an eye on the sky for that. That's it for CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, for news anytime, head to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor. We're on social media as well. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The Rick Mercer Report is coming up next. Have a great night.